Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, we talk all things streaming as we welcome Peter Bellamy, Chief Commercial Officer at Endeavor Streaming and former speaker at World Football Summit Europe, to the show. Peter and I discuss the evolution of the direct-to-consumer streaming space. You're going to learn so much about that, the strategy and the role of that football properties. At the end of the day, as you will listen to him say, they've worked with top brands like Real Madrid, Tottenham, so I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from that. Revenue and business impact on the traditional sports business model and how direct-to-consumer streaming can combine with the traditional broadcasting methods to create a winning proposition. And finally, what the future holds for the space. This one was very fun for me, and I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy it too. So make sure you stick around till the very end. Before we go into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice. And you can share it with your industry colleagues. You would not believe how much that helps us bring guests like Peter to the show. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. Remember, 2024, we have events in London, Mexico, Sevilla. Are you going to join us? Check it out on our website, and hopefully we'll meet you there. Nothing else from my side. Let's get ready to welcome Peter Bellamy. Pete, welcome to the World Football Summit podcast. It's great to have you here because I think the streaming... call it industry space, whatever you want to call it. It's just brings us updates every single day, pretty much. So it's good to have someone like you help us analyze it deeper. So yes, welcome to the show.
Thank you. No, pleasure to be here.
So I was wondering if you can briefly introduce yourself. And I always like to ask my guest, why is it that you do what you do? Why a career related to sports?
Yeah, sure. So kick us off, I suppose, would be so I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Endeavor Streaming. So for those of your listeners that don't know who we are, we're an OTT platform business, basically powering end-to-end OTT services for sports properties, media companies, broadcasters, etc. So we'll get into all of that in more detail, I'm sure, through our conversation. And then, look, I think how I've got into what I'm doing, I was very interested in sport as a kid. Played a lot of sport, went and watched a lot of sport. You know, my dad is a very big sports fan, so I was fortunate to go to lots of football games at Wembley and lots of rugby games, etc. And so that kind of really, I had a foundational interest in sport in general. And then, through university, studied business, did a lot of modules around sport and entertainment, and the role that digital was increasingly playing. And that was kind of a bit of a signpost for me to move into the sector in general. And I've really worked in sport ever since. So rather depressingly for probably about 20 years now.
Depressingly, I think some may be jealous, actually. Don't worry, very,
And I mean depressingly because it makes me feel old. I've enjoyed it. I feel old.
Anyway, well, again, thanks for joining the show. Yes, I mean, so many things to talk about today. But I guess, one of the things I wanted to start with is talking about this evolution with direct-to-consumer streaming. Before going into several of the questions, I would like to ask you if you could describe a little bit the landscape, the shift towards direct-to-consumer streaming in the football industry. This is a World Football Summit show. I guess it has a lot of impact in sports, but if we can just focus on football, it would be great.
Yeah, of course. I think the shift and the impact in football is actually very similar to the impact and the reasons why it's having an overall effect in sport, and it's having an overall effect in the media and entertainment industry. There are a lot of common themes there, but I think if you look generally, we're operating in a more and more complex environment. more optionality for fans and consumers to consume content in different ways, and more and more competition to really drive revenue generating propositions. And if you look specifically at football clubs, they're no different from the leagues that they operate in. They're no different from other sports, and whether it be rugby or American football or baseball. It's all really looking at how do you maximize the revenues of those kind of traditional methodologies, but then also how do you look at diversifying revenue opportunities and looking at investing it in direct to consumer. I think generally football clubs, the football leagues, broadcasters are obviously seeing that providing those more and more tailored direct to consumer experiences can really drive great value for the fan, and really kind of giving them more and more access to the content they love, and through doing that having a two-way relationship and being able to for the club to then monetize in some form or another, either directly or indirectly. So I think that's the reason why there's generally that shift, is because of just the overall market dynamics that are happening on a macro level, and clubs are just becoming a lot more switched on to the fact that they should have a direct relationship with fans, not just in the stadium, but across a whole portfolio of products.
Definitely. And to the point you mentioned at the beginning of before, I always tell people that the interest in football is probably at an all-time high. When people say, no, people are not watching games. Yeah, but you know what? There's so many things now you can consume the game in so many ways. So you have your documentaries, you have your highlights, you have your matches, obviously.
Yep.
You have video games, you have fantasy games. I mean, whatever, right? So definitely there's interest there. I guess I'm wondering, you were mentioning about the value that this can help football clubs create. I was wondering if you can go a little bit deeper into how D2C streaming services actually create that value. How can it enhance that club's relationship with the fans? Which at the end of the day, the goal should be to create value.
Yeah, of course. So look, I think the kind of continuation on from my previous points, I suppose, really is that if you look at fan engagement, if you look at as you say, there's such a wide range of ways that you can engage in football content now. You've got your traditional linear cable TV propositions. You've got the sports leagues or federations themselves starting to deploy out their own propositions. You've got all the big kind of platforms, social platforms. You then have a massive unofficial supporter channel set of services as well, right? Which get huge engagement levels. And I think if you look specifically at football clubs, what they can really do that arguably none of the others can do is provide that, incredibly club-focused, personalized experience. The broadcasters can't do it. They've got too much content that they need to be managing on a day-to-day basis. So they'll do their kind of appointment to view live deployments. They'll have magazine shows, etc. Leagues as well can do a really creative job about how to repackage highlights, etc. But if you're really looking as a super fan driven experience, the clubs are by far in the best position to do that. So I think that's where they can deliver the most value, is by looking at very targeted content propositions where you're getting access to content that you really feel that you're not going to get elsewhere. Now, crucially, with that, you have to get buy-in across the club. So you have to get buy-in across management, across players, etc., to really have the right level of access. But being able to feel like you're getting behind the scenes access, and also getting that quite regularly access to the players, the talent, what's happening within the football club, is incredibly powerful as something that those kind of super fans really want to consume. So I think that's where the big focus is, and that's where the clubs can really stand out in what they're delivering to their fans, as opposed to the the very wide range of offers elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree, because I mean the fan at the end of the day, they want to get as close as they can to the game, right?
Exactly.
And who's in better position than a club to do that, right?
Yeah. And I also think that the clubs can be the most authentic as well, right? They can really tailor the messaging, really kind of represent content from that fan's point of view. They can be they can be quite biased in almost in a positive way as to how they position that content as well, which, as we know, fans of any club absolutely lean into, and feeling like you're really part of that kind of journey is something that's incredibly powerful.
At the end of the day, that's the benefit of being the source of the content, right? You own the message rather than
Exactly.
relying on
Exactly.
others to do so, right?
Yeah, absolutely wrong.
But one question here, Pete, because okay, I understand the benefits, and I think everybody does. But the reality is, when football clubs they face pressure to drive revenue, to create revenue, and I understand the benefits of owning the message. Probably when you get D2C, you own the fans' data, if you will, and with that, you can actually personalize the experience. To your point before, you can create a more relevant offering across all fields for the fan. But that means sacrificing, if you will, short-term revenue coming in from traditional broadcasting, right? So I don't know if you can speak to how can clubs balance that.
Yeah, so I think I would say actually that the first mistake there was I would almost say is that the clubs shouldn't really be directly assessing their kind of broadcast media rights valuations and their direct to consumer streaming. There are some outliers there, like the US market's different. So with the US market, because of the regional access to live streaming, actually the teams in some ways can drive their own direct consumer premium live experience, and they've got some trade-offs that they can look at, which is that direct. Do we take that media rights check through a regional streaming network, or do we do it with a traditional broadcaster, or do we do something directly ourselves within that particular area of the US market? I think generally, if you move outside of there and you look at the European football landscape, especially, the vast majority of those live rights are really tied up at a league level, and are really made available through broadcast cable TV deals. So I think the focus very much for the kind of football OTT services in the foreseeable is less about comparing the media rights value versus direct consumer, because I think generally those live rights are going to be tied up elsewhere. And it's much more about how does OTT provide a more and more holistic experience for fans, where, I think the absolute gold standard that all of these clubs are going to really try and strive towards is having a really well thought through multifunctional digital experience, where actually with your same user credentials, you can buy tickets, you can transact in the shop, you can consume a huge amount of fantasy and gaming products. You can potentially bet if that's something that's obviously of interest to them, and then video can be built into that entire kind of experience. I think that's where the focus should be for clubs. And then actually, what it also helps is you can then look at your investment strategy for video content, and you're not just looking at return on investment specifically within the video product. You can really look at indirect revenue gains in building that into that portfolio, so that actually it can become an easier conversation about how you kind of fund some of those initiatives.
Hmm, interesting. That's an interesting point, actually. And to your initial point, relevance is key for me, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is going to let you create a more relevant experience for your fans, and even segment your fans even better. And then when you look at the landscape, the reality is that traditional broadcasting rates, let's say, they're either plateauing or decreasing. Because if you
Yep.
look at major markets, CDA has taken a pay cut there. The English Premier League, although in total value, it may seem that the value is bigger in terms of the broadcasting right, but you look at the average per game, that's actually lower. So, who knows if that trend's going to continue, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, look, on that, I think the trends we're generally seeing are that the absolute kind of top tier biggest sports properties in the world I think are still, quite a lot of them are still getting good outcomes in their domestic market, their primary market. But increasingly in the international market, they're struggling to compete for the broadcasters' budget. So I think that that's clearly a trend. And then I think as you move into tier two sports properties, I think it's an increasingly kind of challenging market. But I feel, and I think we're seeing it already, that will just lead to more creative ways of packaging up content, looking for different types of partnerships in market, looking for co-exclusive partnerships, where, again, to what we're talking about today, it will allow, sports leagues and properties and potentially teams to co-share in customer data, to cross-promote between platforms, where actually some partners in particular markets are able to take a subset of rights that they're very keen on, but then from there actually promote to the OTT destination of that sports property. I think that's going to become an increasingly relevant trend for how some of these deals are put down. And I think those more strategic tie-ups will actually lead to better outcomes for both parties, and longer term partnerships as well, because then you can see that there are combined benefits of, maybe it's a slightly more cost-effective rights package for the broadcaster, but in return, the sports property is getting more exposure from a branding point of view. They're getting access to customer data, and that they can start to build their own kind of direct consumer strategy as well. So I think that will be another trend that will become increasingly popular.
That's a good point. I think at the end of the day, it's about collaborating. It's not an either or, and I think exactly both can benefit, because who knows? I mean, probably the football club can actually also guide the broadcaster in terms of those segments and creating that experience together. No, so it goes both ways. And to being practical, let's say that a football club out there or a football property out there is listening to us, and they want to start this journey. So I don't know if you can talk about the steps they need to take to start this, or what are the, maybe even for the steps, what are the key elements of the strategy they need to consider? I mean, wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a fair range in the strategy that clubs can take. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but depending on that strategy, what are they looking to do? Are they looking to build a kind of a video destination, which maybe is linked to, but is relatively separate from the wider portfolio of services? Are they looking to therefore deploy a kind of premium price point to that? Are they looking at very much a kind of membership centric experience, and maybe utilizing video products as a something to entice you to become a member to a wider program of offers? So every deployment we do is different, and that's not just the case for football clubs. That's the case for every client we really have on our platform, because they all have slightly different market needs, very different requirements in different territories, etc. So there's some commonality, but it's not a completely repeatable process, I would say, in general. But look, I think for football clubs themselves, there are some foundational kind of strategic aspects that you have to consider as part of that planning phase. I think obviously having a very well thought through content strategy, like we touched on before. How does that content differentiate from what you can get on a league level service or via cable TV package, etc.? So that very unique content strategy. I think I said this before, but getting the buy-in from management, players, etc., to ensure that that content strategy is compelling, because if you don't get the access, that content will not kind of really resonate with fans, and therefore you're kind of starting from the back foot. And then I think as I said, really looking at what the underlying business model is, what the key performance kind of indicators are. Is this a direct revenue driven strategy, or is this looking to add value elsewhere? And then from there, you've got to look at the kind of portfolio of devices, what's important for you. And then you've got to look at your target markets as well. So again, how much of your focus with your D2C strategy is on the domestic market? How much of it is based on a kind of globally available value add service where you're just trying to capture customer or fan data? And then also, really important is, where are your international markets where you really want to lean in and do more? So if you look at every single club, right? If you look at, we work with Real Madrid, we work with Tottenham Hotspur, with Feyenoord, with lots of kind of US teams, etc. if you look at that strategy, they all have international players which are absolute superstars back in their domestic market. So really looking at how do you then have a strategy for Jude Bellingham with Real Madrid's OTT service for the English market? How do you have a strategy for with Tottenham Hotspur and Sonny and the fact that he's an absolute superstar in South Korea? It's all of those things that you've got to build into it to really look at what the overall proposition should really kind of try and achieve.
I like this because at the end of the day, the underlying theme of all of this is relevance. And once again, not because this is where it's going to help
Yeah.
you achieve that. No, if you're able to target content from Jude Bellingham in the UK from Real Madrid, you're going to get fans from there. Whether it's they take, let's say, Vinicius, they're going to get more fans from Brazil, right? So it really
Yeah.
is about that, no? And you did mention at the beginning some of the challenges they could face, but I don't know if you can go into a little bit more detail on what are the typical challenges that clubs face when implementing, a D2C service like this.
I think the most obvious one within football, I would say, is that club football is about as passionate as you get when it comes to fandom, and I think everything that we've done in football and specifically for football clubs, there's been a huge focus on fan sensitivity. So really thinking through what the proposition is, if there's going to be a premium price point, what that premium price point should be, what the content portfolio needs to be to go into that, so that fans very, very clearly see that this is something new and additional to anything that they've been able to access previously. Because we know that fans are incredibly loyal, but they are also very discerning as to where they spend their money with the club. And I think that, understandably, the clubs are always very focused on, how much are my season ticket holders paying? How frequent are they coming? How much money are they spending across other products? And how do we make sure that the fans really feel like they're getting value out of this? So, I think that's a very, very common theme with every deployment we've had. And I think football clubs are more aware of that than probably league propositions and other sports. So that's an important area. And I think because of that, we've seen across all of the services we've launched with football clubs, they've really looked at different tiers of access of content. So even the simplest form of having a kind of season pass, but having a one price for casual fans and another price for members, where members can see that they're getting it for 50% cheaper, or as I say, like with Real Madrid and others, where they actually have tiers of membership where you get different types of access as part of those packages. Those are the areas you've really got to ensure that you're messaging it correctly. And thankfully, so far, I think with our deployments, all of them have landed well. And that's mainly congratulations to our football club partners rather than us, because they're the ones that have decided on how to slice and dice the content. But look, I think outside of that, I would say the other challenges that football clubs will have is ensuring that they have enough content for it to be compelling at launch, but crucially, a really good roster of content to stay relevant throughout the entire season, and to some extent in the kind of off season as well. I think that's absolutely front and center of from a planning perspective. And obviously, as part of that, you need the right level of investment to continue to create that content. Sorry.
Yeah, at the end of the day, to your last point, it's about creating, or I like to say, is mental availability, meaning that you're always on top of mind for the consumer. And you look at, for example, to me, organizations like the NBA, the NFL, they do a fantastic job on this because, look at the NFL, they finish the season, then it's the Pro Bowl, then it's the trade market, then it's the draft, then it's, and then just they keep you going throughout the year, even if their season is only 20 games long, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. And look, we know this just more generally, that trying repeatability and behavior is a crucial aspect of driving, the better retention
exactly.
of your customer base. So again, when you look at what football clubs should be doing with these services, it's that regularity of content, but also it's making sure it's familiar in that it's dropping at a at a schedule that they start to understand, and then they actually start to adapt their behaviors according to that content and when it's being dropped.
Very strategic about it. Really have
Yeah,
everything well thought out, which is tough challenge to do. No? Um, and
yeah,
your point about you've mentioned some of the clubs you've worked with, Real Madrid, Tottenham. I don't know if you can help us identify common patterns, best practices of how they're without going into unnecessary details, but just enough learnings for those listening to understand how these clubs are actually approaching this.
yeah. So I think, I mean, we're fortunate as well in that we've got a wide portfolio of clients, as I said, across different sectors. So, we actually we take a lot of learnings from our bigger client portfolios elsewhere. So, running services for UFC, for UEFA, big broadcasters, and as you know, big broadcast cable TV businesses have been, living and breathing this for decades about how do you acquire and retain customers. So powering those very large kind of TV everywhere focus services for Univision and for Sky and the like really have aided our thinking around how to apply those learnings to the sports properties. And also crucially, the big area for us as a business is sports properties and football clubs are generally, pretty lean organizations, right? I think a lot of people look from the outside in and they look at these big, huge football clubs, massive brands, and they just think, wow, they must have a readily available big revenue pool to invest in these things, and they must have a really big team ready to go to execute the digital, the marketing strategy, etc. Actually, that's not true. A lot of these clubs kind of have a nucleus of in and around the actual business of football, team management, player management, transfers, training facilities, where huge portion of their investment goes. And then actually around that, they're pretty light from a resourcing point of view. So we do try and lean in a lot more there with regards to helping with kind of strategy and execution. So that's probably just a little bit of background on some of the different operating models, I suppose, that we see in football in comparison to others. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question a little bit. I think the other aspects there around, you know, best practice, I kind of think we touched on already, but it all comes back to the content strategy, ensuring that you've got the relevant marketing budget to really attract them. That content strategy doesn't run for 3 months from launch; it runs on an annualized basis. And then, as I say, that very specific treatment on what do you want to package up as premium versus what do you want to package up for your existing members, and what do you want to package up to try and tease those casual fans to become members of other propositions.
If I could summarize what you just said, which is a great answer, but if I could just summarize it in 2 words, I would say it's commitment and clarity. At the end of the day, no, because you need resources, you need to invest, you need content, you need to put a team, you need to give it a lot of thought, but then you also need to communicate with your fans very well about what they're going to be able to find there, what's premium, what's not premium, all the messaging, as you alluded to that before, no? So that would be the way.
Yeah, I think that's actually it's a very good way of covering it. I think, just launching, and you saw this more generally in kind of OTT direct to consumer. If you go back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, a lot of sports properties would decide, oh, we should have an OTT platform because lots of other people seem to be doing it, and they would go and select a partner to build it for them, and then they would all kind of pat themselves on the back and say, right, we've launched it, brilliant, right, that's now there. Let's all now go and refocus on our other initiatives within the business. I think everyone is, broadly across the board is so much more switched on to that point, as you say, about kind of commitment to really continue to invest in it, because that's the only way you're going to really
Yeah.
see
And you
meaningful
mentioned
traction with your fans.
it's a must, to have enough content and to be able to quote unquote feed it. Are there any types of
Yeah.
content that you've found to be most effective in And I'm looking at the lens of not only acquiring, but as you said before, the importance of these things is to actually retain these fans, right? So
Yeah, so I think, stating the obvious, live is still the most valuable content, but in this in the topic we're talking about here, and specifically about kind of maybe more of a skew towards European football, most of those clubs have limited access to live content. So I think what we generally find is that, summer friendlies, pre-season friendlies, that's where the clubs actually do have access to a selection of games, 5, 6, 7 games prior to the start of their domestic season. That's always a pretty compelling window for acquiring new fans. And, again, we've had clubs do it in different ways. Run live, but run it within a program to convert you to a membership package, run them as individual pay-per-views to just directly monetize. So different ways of doing that, obviously, but that's very valuable for them, that kind of summer period. So we actually find that most of the new deployments we launch, if you look at the way the clubs take this to market, we're having conversations with them in the kind of autumn, especially for the European circuit. You're having conversations in the autumn, you're finalizing plans early in the following year. You're then building and executing through the spring of that year, and then you're launching that brand new kind of proposition in kind of early summer to then really take advantage of excitement with the new season, being able to monetize those live games in some form or another. And then you're looking at that kind of content strategy in season. That's generally the flow of how we're working with the clubs. But I think outside of that, like we touched on, consistency and frequency of content, I think, is very important. I think clubs again can do so much more than any of the other platforms about, the average week of a football club. And I still think that there's so much more to do. I think as a fan of football, I think, you don't need to have endless high production, high cost content packages. It's also really important to have a lot of short form content. And if you can get that short form content built into, it's a Monday afternoon, it's after the weekend's game, and you're live from the training ground for 20 minutes, and the manager, runs off the training ground, gives a quick update as to, how the player's doing, etc. That sort of content, I think, really resonates with fans as well. And having that as a schedule, and then you can really look to build that content proposition through the week up towards that weekend as well. So really, we're trying to look at how do we build initiatives where you can have a very strong non-match day content proposition and a schedule against that, and then also a very strong match day content proposition outside of the live rights, which are generally being broadcast elsewhere.
yeah, because I would imagine that the thing is, or the objective here is to create or to have fans engaged and create hype towards the next game, right? So the role of short form content is, I'll give you enough of a dose of content for you to not forget about me, and a little bit of a teaser of what's going to come up, and then the game on the weekend or whatever. And in that regard, I mean, I guess cannot avoid talking about technology and how fast things are changing.
Exactly.
So I don't know if there's any um, trend or technology that is actually that you believe is going to shape the future of D2C streaming.
Yeah, spot on. Well, I think, yeah, definitely there are some very clear trends. I think coming back to it with football clubs, I think a single sign-on solution with regards to fan data and access is just absolutely crucial. And, different clubs are at different stages in that journey. But as I said
And in
before,
Madrid,
football clubs, they have to get to the point over time where they can see, let's take the example of, you and I are the fan of the same football club, right? But let's just take any example. So we're both fans of Tottenham Hotspur, right? Where do you live? There you go. So
yeah,
you're in
mhm,
Madrid, I'm in London, and as two fans of Tottenham, I go to lots of home games, but I generally don't seem to purchase much through the club shop. But I consume a lot of video. and also I'm engaged with some of the gaming products that Spurs have. And this is all just theoretical, right? Whereas you very rarely get to games because of your location, but you buy a huge amount of club shop merchandise, and you don't really watch too much video. If you have that kind of centralized data strategy over time, all these clubs, and Spurs as just an example, but all these clubs over time should be able to build loyalty and reward programs where with me, because I go to lots of games, that I should basically be hit with a nice proposition, which is, hey, thanks for all the support. Here's 30% off the club shop for the next 2 weeks. And then it drives me into an engagement in an area where I'm not particularly engaged. Whereas for you, because of your great kind of support from Madrid and the fact that you're interacting with the shop a lot and you're buying a lot of merchandise, we should be able to look at you and go, actually, we should really try and present a really compelling discounted ticketing and travel package to get you to come to the stadium twice a year to watch a game. Those are the types of strategies that all the clubs are attempting to adopt over time. It's quite complex to do, but ultimately, though, I think the rewards are very significant. So that centralized data strategy is foundational to being able to deliver those types of experiences. And then, look, I think outside of that, more interactivity, polls, quizzes, more rewards, as I say, for kind of loyalty-based behaviors. And then I think, more and more kind of personalization. I think with, again, that data strategy over time, you'll be able to become more and more personalized in the video assets that they surface for me versus for you, according to your kind of your habits and interests. So I think those are the general trends I think are going to kind of really come out with regards to football clubs specifically. And then I think also over time, I see that there will probably be, as leagues start to build out their digital strategy more fully, I think there will become a closer relationship between league level digital propositions and promoting into club level propositions and vice versa. I think that will become increasingly important with regards to the league club relationship and driving kind of value and benefits to both sides as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It actually reminds me of a conversation I had with Steven Mendes on the show. And we were asking ourselves, when clubs speak about the fan, you actually have to ask yourself, who's the fan? To the example that you were mentioning, we were saying, yeah, there's a lot of fans that live in the city, but they never go to a game. But they actually kind of like feel that the team is theirs. Whereas the international fan might be the one, as you said, purchasing more merchandising or more content or whatever. So at the end of the day, you're getting actually more value from the international fan. And to that point, I actually once heard Peter Moore, former CEO at Liverpool, say that during his time at the club, at least, the international fan drove higher lifetime value than the national fan. So the local fan.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, I can talk about that from personal experience as well. And that I'm actually a Liverpool fan, which they did not do very well last night against Everton. But anyway, putting that to one side, I went. I took my son. I mean, we live down near London, but I took my son and we went up there. And because we went up there for the weekend. So we did the stadium tour the day before. We obviously did the match tickets on the day. We went via the shop to buy, additional things. And then actually, you look at the impact on the wider city, it's incredible what the draw is. And the sheer number of international fans coming in is incredible.
And I'm thinking, is there a way to put like a number or kind of like identify the potential in terms of revenues that, a D2C streaming service can actually bring in to a club versus the traditional broadcasting deals? Because at the moment, traditional broadcasting, if you will, is about 40% of the total sport business model. Just to put a rough figure there based on what Deloitte published. I don't know if, there's some projections there that you can share.
If you look at the rights market, there is big disruption, but also there are still very big rights checks being written. So is there a really aggressive switch that's going to happen in prioritization of a traditional media rights partnerships versus direct to consumer. No, I think you mentioned this before. It's not either or. I think it'll differ market by market. You look more on league level propositions. So, we partner with Liga, the French league. We do a lot of work with UEFA TV. You know, those league and federation level services, they really look for OTT to obviously drive a really compelling direct to consumer database over time. They look at that on a global level. Over time, depending on rights landscapes, they will look at dark markets or those kind of tier 3 markets where they don't feel like there's much traction, and look to deploy live experiences there as well. So, and then really, I think the other factor which I did mention before is I do see that there'll be much more creative partnerships between different players. So again, it's really not an either or. But look, for sure, the media rights revenue for these clubs is still very, very significant. And I continue to think that will be the case for a long time. But OTT as a experience and as part of a wider digital strategy and a wider customer data strategy is something that every single club should be doing. They should be doing it right now, because that's going to give them the optionality around different ways to commercialize things, because the way rights packages were done for the previous 3 to 6 years are different to the renewals that are happening right now for the next 3 to 6 years. And you know damn well that in 3 to 6 years' time, the landscape will have evolved even more. And if the clubs haven't taken advantage of this next 3 to 6 years to really build their own direct consumer strategy, they're going to be missing out on commercialization opportunities further down the line.
Is this something that it's only for big clubs, or can any, middle, small, big size club can actually approach this?
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely it's not just for the big clubs. I think it comes down to a cost-effective investment plan ultimately, because if you actually look, the cost of the outsourcing to technology businesses like ourselves, there are cost-effective ways of doing that. I think probably some of the challenges for the smaller clubs are ensuring that they've got enough internal investment for that content production, and also that they have enough of an appetite and, as you said, commitment to really put some marketing dollars behind it to really drive that interest and excitement from fans. But, the cost of actually deploying a video experience for smaller clubs, that really shouldn't be a barrier for them doing that. So I fully expect that, all clubs through all the major leagues and into the secondary leagues should all have some form of direct consumer video offering. But as we've discussed through this session, the makeup of that and how well it's integrated, or whether it's a standalone premium proposition, really comes down to what the content mix is.
And it goes back to the content strategy being, very clear what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And actually, sometimes it's being able to say no, I guess, in a way. You can't do everything, but at least do something. It's not an either or, right? And you mentioned about, the need to actually plan for the future, because it's going to happen. But what do you see?
Yeah, just on that planning for the future, I often kind of, when talking to clients or we're talking to potential new partners, right? I think the example I always give is this concept of a cold start versus a warm start. Because we know how highly disrupted the market is, and there are opportunities and threats, according to what's happening in different countries, and whether that be for sports properties or leagues or teams, whatever it may be. But if you don't invest in that kind of direct consumer strategy, and not just talking about video, just generally trying to really build a compelling direct consumer portfolio of services, if you don't do that, and then we're talking 3 years down the line from here, and then suddenly there's really significant disruption, and you then are forced to take a lot more of your content and offers direct to consumer, the difference of doing that where you've where you've run a service for 3 years and maybe you've built up a active fan base of 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, depending on the size of your property. But you get what I mean, that the doing that with an established active fan base versus launching it from scratch and going and starting from zero is incredibly tough. So there is, in some of these conversations, there's an investment kind of profile to doing this, but it's a very scary proposition if you're suddenly doing it from scratch with no real kind of direct to consumer strategy that you've been running for a few years.
And to that point, Peter, I mean, okay, we all understand that in the future, you have to get ready for that future, but what can football clubs start doing today to actually prepare for that?
Well, I think the kind of like as I said, I think every football club should have some form of super fan direct to consumer proposition, right? The makeup of that, as we've said, can be very different from one club to another. But I think you have to look at the available budget to you and find a way of starting to go on that journey. That's the single biggest piece of advice I think we would give as a business, is being able to start to understand how your fans are engaging with content, start to, partner with businesses like ourselves and others to really analyze the data, analyze usage trends, which then can inform subsequent rounds of investment. That kind of test and learn in market strategy is just, I think, something that all clubs should really be looking to do.
And obviously, we touched upon technology a little bit earlier. I cannot avoid asking about artificial intelligence now that everybody's talking about it. The way I see it is it might help create more relevant content, and that is actually going to help, I guess, reducing churn. But that's just my assumption. I don't know if I'm correct. If I'm not, please feel free to correct me. And just that, where can AI actually impact the space more?
Oh, look, I think you are right. So I think we're utilizing AI to build predictive models, right, which is surfacing some fantastic kind of results for our clients. Where previously we've not done that for some clients, but then we've really looked at mining performance data and building out predictive models against particular usage trends. We've found that through doing that, you are then able to tailor very specific content and marketing programs, and we've seen improvements in acquisition and retention of 30-40% in utilizing kind of machine learning predictive models. So it's definitely a big part of our longer term strategy. I think, like most businesses, we're early into that, but I think utilizing AI around performance trends will be increasingly important. That allows you to look at personalization at scale. So personalization of video propositions for, user A versus user B, rather than even doing it on like a cohort level, is something that AI will allow us to do. So very important for the strategy generally.
Thanks for that. And overall, Peter, thank you so much for the conversation. I want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to ask you, kind of shifting gears totally, about, what we've been speaking about, because you've had, as you said at the beginning, 20 years of experience in the industry. You've managed to become an expert in the space and help, and work with some of the most amazing brands in football. And so I was wondering, because a lot of the people who listen are actually aspiring sports business professionals, whether they're young or not so young, they just want to transition into the industry. So what advice would you have for anybody looking to transition into either the sports industry or actually just to the sports streaming industry?
Oof, good question. I mean, I would say the sports industry, like so many industry, it's so wide ranging, right? I mean, if you think about the sports industry, like yourself, you can move into journalism, you can move into events management or sponsorship or media rights or technology. There's so many different ways that you can enter into sport. I think, if you're starting out your career, it's obviously very different from if you're looking to transition. I think if you're starting out your career, really looking at those disciplines and working out which of those you kind of feel that you're more interested in as I think really important, because that also then allows you to have transferable skills as well if you focus on one of those. I think if you're early in your career, our sister company IMG, they run fantastic kind of intern programs where you can really kind of consume the whole machinery of IMG across, as I say, kind of like media and production and events, etc. So I think just get stuck in, right? I think find a relevant couple of businesses that you are interested in, and really get your research done, get your foot in the door, and then learn on the job. But I think it's a great industry to work in. I think there's huge disruption at the minute, but huge amount of opportunity, and every day is different, which I find is really kind of motivating and interesting.
It's like football itself in a way, no?
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's unpredictable. But thanks so much for that advice, because I fully agree. First, the importance of transferable skills, being able to shift to different parts of the industry. And second, what you said about the opportunity, I totally agree with it. In fact, at World Football Summit, we believe that, no? In that there's so much potential for the industry, so much opportunities for talent, for professionalizing the industry, that and even with these technological changes, changes can happen. And we're going to need talent to actually, fulfill the potential that we expect the industry to reach. No,
Within sport, you've also got these macro trends which are very exciting with women's sport, right? So again, there's so much opportunity there. If you think about the scale of opportunity that will be within women's sports, as most of them grow prolifically over the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to create a huge amount of opportunity for people coming into the industry. We've seen we run the NWSL service in the US, so the main women's league over there, and they've had fantastic kind of growth through the last kind of season, and they've just started their next one. So just generally in women's sport, I think there's so much opportunity as well for people to lean into.
and that's a very good point. Don't take me there, because we're going to need another hour, Peter, to discuss about that. But I guess what we'll have to do is just bring you back and analyze everything that's, all the potential that women's football is going to reach, because I think they're just getting started. No? So I want to thank you again for this amazing conversation. I don't know if there's any last words, you want to share with the audience. Where can people learn more about you, about, Deaver, whatever you want to, the floor is yours, really.
No, look, I think, as I say, I think it's an exciting industry to be in, and I think I'm kind of very motivated to see how it plays out. I see amazing kind of opportunities and so much convergence across, like I've talked about extensively, across partnership driven initiatives across broadcasters and platforms and sports properties and leagues, etc. So I'm just excited to kind of see how it plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, that's right. I think we all are. So, Peter, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll bring you back soon, in the future, and we can keep analyzing the different trends, because it's going to change so fast. Meanwhile, have a good day, and thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye. And there you have him, Peter Bellamy from Endeavor Streaming. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's always great to have experts like himself, with so much expertise in the industry around a specific topic. And I think streaming is one of those topics that we have to really understand, because it does seem it's going to be playing a big part in the sport business model of the future. No? Let me try to summarize a little bit what we spoke about, because there were so many interesting learnings. As we said, the interest in football and in sports is at an all-time high. And the amount of content that you can create is very, very big, right? But at the end of the day, the importance there is that it's relevant for the fans, and that it's targeted. And in that regard, implementing a D2C streaming service, it enables that, because it creates more connection with the fan. You can actually create or gather more data, which at the end of this is going to create a flywheel, because you're going to be able to create an experience where you're creating personalized content and more relevant content for the fans, right? As we discussed. But at the end of the day, this does not mean that you have to just forget about the traditional broadcasting methods. As Peter was mentioning, the trend here is going to be how clubs can effectively combine both and actually have a combination of the traditional broadcasting methods with the direct to consumer streaming services to create a holistic experience. And in fact, how can both parties actually benefit from? But when implementing a D2C streaming service, I think for me, there's three keywords, right? On one hand, there's relevance, but there's also a need to actually commit and to have clarity. Commit being, you really have to be able to create enough content. You have to be able to create a clear strategy, but then also that clarity has to be, transferred into the messaging, that in the communication of the strategy to the fans, and to help them understand why a club is launching such a service, and the pricing. So definitely clarity is a big one there. And at the end of the day, what to look out for the future: personalization, interactivity. So how can you actually connect with fans during the game? And just have an overall central data strategy that's going to drive insights. And from that insight, you're going to be able to create a clear strategy and an implementation plan, right, let's say, right? And really take his advice about starting now, even if the future seems so far away. But and you really have to invest on it now, because you never know how fast this is going to evolve. And finally, keep in mind his advice for you guys looking to create a successful career in the industry. There's a lot of opportunity there, and you just have to be open, but be willing to um, be someone that can actually transfer skills from one industry to the other, because you never know. There's so much opportunity, so many things happening, that you just never know what opportunity is going to come up. Anyway, guys, that was it for me. I don't know if there's anything else that stood out to you. If so, as always, don't forget to reach out on social media and let us know. And don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice, and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, everything that goes on at our events. And yeah, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. And nothing else from my side. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.